It's so tempting to point to the Putnam name and say they were the villains of the Salem Witch Trials. But it's very clear it was a huge family, and it was really a mixture of behaviors, some causing lots of strife and trouble and really going hard for the witches, others defending them, others we don't really know where they stood. It's a complicated history, and it goes to show that not everyone involved in the witch trials was the same. Many people played multiple roles, sometimes accusing, sometimes defending. Many people did both in the course of this year, and lots of people changed their minds about the witch trials over time.